Welcome back to Appwrite's OSS Fund stream. Today we're talking about mock service worker with Artem. Hey Artem, how's it going?
Hey there, it's good. What about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Can you just break down like what mock service worker is before we dive too much into like the maintaining of it?
Sure. So Next Service Worker is an API mocking library, and it allows you to basically describe the network behavior you want and have it always there, like a given, for example, when testing. And yeah, that's the premise of it. And it works for browser and Node, and it allows you to reuse the same mocks across basically your entire stack without any plugins or configs whatsoever.
And can you like describe like why would a person actually need a mock service worker? Like APIs are all over the place. Why would someone actually go about using them?
Yeah, I think just as you said, we like APIs are all over the place, and whenever you're building an app, you're very likely communicating with either your own backend API or you have a third-party services. And whenever you come to, for example, testing the logic you wrote, you really don't want to be hitting those services during tests.
Yeah.
So this is where things like MSW and API mocking generally comes in, because it allows you to kind of draw this boundary what becomes like a test prerequisite and what's actually the test behavior. So you can say, for example, capture all the calls to my Stripe API and return me this precise responses. And this allows you to test your app and how it reacts to whichever response it may receive from Stripe on production, for example.
Yeah, that's really cool. So how did you come up with like mock service worker? Like where did that idea stem from? And were you using it like for work or like a hobby? How did it all get started?
Yeah, it's a crazy story. It started like pet project. It was actually like a weekend prototype.
Okay.
So we were using something else at work back in the day, and I wasn't really happy with it because it required us to do quite a lot of changes to the actual code that we wrote to our app. So for example, we hit different endpoints during tests, and I was just curious, how can this get better if it ever can? And I wrote this list of things I want from API mocking solution. And yeah, then I was started researching on the web, and Service Worker API popped up. I had zero idea about what that was
Sure.
back at the time. And I was reading about it, and it slowly hit me like, hey, this is actually pretty cool. Because if you're unfamiliar, what service workers do, they kind of register as like a tiny box in the browser next to your app. And whichever outgoing traffic you have, for example, like making a HTTP request, it goes out of your app and into the worker, and only then it leaves the browser and goes its way through the network. And this was really cool because I thought, hey, if I can use this API for mocking, it would be really great. I would be able to intercept requests without stubbing any, fetch any request clients and actually deliver responses as if they came from the network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really neat. I keep seeing service worker API being used in so many like interesting fashions. I think the team over at Builder.io is using it for Party Town. And they're like using the synchronous XHR requests and like passing that through. And so it's kind of alleviating some of that async API calls that like
Mhm.
slow down, like fake slow down a site basically. So it's really interesting the power of service workers these days.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kind of like, so you had this like idea, you had this need, and then you started creating it. What made you want to jump into like the open source side of it and like start to let other people do it? Because often like you have a need like this, you could just make it for yourself. What was kind of the understanding there and the need to put that open source?
I still made it for myself, but it was a couple of years as I was used to actually open sourcing everything I built. So I liked uh, pushing ideas publicly. And I made this repo, and I just kept, I basically wrote this little prototype. It was like 100 lines long. It had a lot of bugs and issues, but hey, it delivered the MVP. So I was somewhat happy with it. And it was public on GitHub. But after time went on, I actually abandoned the project because, well, I didn't advocate about it at work. It was still very hacky, as I mentioned. Everything was running in the worker, which has proven to be quite a mistake. And it was there lying abandoned. And then one day I woke up to my Twitter feed buzzing. I had like 20 notifications, which is crazy. And there was basically a thread started by Kenzie Dodds, which you probably know. He's a great figure in the whole JavaScript ecosystem.
Yep.
And he was picking up an API mocking solution for his upcoming Epic React course back in the day. And one of my ex-colleagues, just pinged my little prototype, like, hey, this is like a cool prototype, whatever. And Kent looked into that and he actually liked that. And he started submitting some issues, sharing ideas. Hey, can it do this? Or can you maybe change it to work like this? And yeah, it's everything else is history, basically. And slowly, month after month, I was able to polish it and solve a lot of issues, and especially those around the worker, because it's primarily a caching tool. So we had to design quite a few things in MSW to work as you would expect, basically, so you don't even notice the worker. And yeah, I guess it was open source from the start. And I think that's a natural way to share ideas. And I'm really happy that it was.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. How it kind of something you maybe left behind got like all revitalized. Just one person saw it and took off with it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Love Kent, have him on the show all the time, so it's really cool to see him. So I'm curious if other people want to help you out with MSW, or like what is the best way for them to either use the product and like get to know it and start using it, or on top of that, like even better, how to like make your OSS project even better by supporting it or like jumping into it and helping contribute to it. How can people help you the best?
I think really the easiest way to help is always to use software, to use open source software. So if you like something, give it a try. And then if you encounter any kind of issues, or even if you're stuck, it doesn't have to be an issue. Maybe you can't figure it out. And it's really great when people don't give up on this stage and they just go to the repo and they actually submit a question, they start a discussion or maybe an issue. And this is really, really helpful for maintainers. At least I know it's been helpful for me when people share their experience and hey, maybe I can write the docs a bit better, and maybe there's an issue and I just haven't covered it in test, because nobody used it this way.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely contributing with issues and your experience, it helps a lot. And then there's always like what I'm trying to do whenever people submit issues, and I know it may be actually a pretty great beginner issue for everybody. What I'm trying to engage people, just saying, hey, maybe you would like to open a PR. I can support you with the review. I can help you write tests. And I'm trying to create this kind of environment where you can contribute, even if you think you don't know maybe the technicality of the library. I mean, we can all figure it out together. It really matters about people adopting this culture. Like, hey, this is the library I'm using, but it's actually also my code that I'm shipping to users. So I can help whichever maintainer works on it to make it better.
Yeah, that's really cool. I noticed on your repo you have quite a few labels too. Is the like good first issue, is that a good one for a beginner to go after?
Absolutely. I'm trying to review issues time to time, and whenever I see something that's actually a great start, I always try to mark it with good first issue, or sometimes I just like mark issues with need help, which may be a more advanced thing, or maybe just an area which I myself not familiar. Like I know when we were working on React Native support, I'm not an iOS developer, and I don't have any experience with React Native, so I was always marking it like help wanted, and eventually people just noticed that and contributed with their expertise, and we got MSW shipped to React Native as well.
Wow, that's incredible. So basically every JavaScript framework, and now it sounds like React Native even is supported. Is there things like Flutter capability or anything like that? Or is that too far? Like that's not JavaScript anymore, Alex?
I wish I could definitely say yes, but I haven't used those tools. So I think there is a decent chance that it will work out of the box. But again, if it's not, people can give it a try and submit maybe a repo where they did so, and we can look into that together.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. I know, at least from a web standpoint on Flutter, because it, can go cross-platform and everything. I really love how you have things broken out for like scope browser, scope node. So it really like clarifies all the issues and everything too. That's really cool. Well, what would you say is kind of, as a maintainer of a large OSS project, what's the most difficult thing you deal with?
Recently, one of my biggest struggles is to get the knack of this whole ECMAScript CommonJS publishing, because the whole ecosystem moves forward and we're trying to adopt ECMAScript modules,
Mhm.
ESM format everywhere, but it's still so difficult in terms of what you need to do as a library author. Like you can ship ECMAScript only packages, which is perhaps the most straightforward solution. But what I encountered in at least my experience, whenever this happens, and I'm not ready to migrate my whole app into ECMAScript, this is basically a blocker for me. So what I'm trying to learn is to how to do this dual publishing, so you have both CommonJS and ECMAScript, and you don't break projects for people, but you still provide them with this future version, basically. And it's
Is
really been, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask, is there tooling that you're kinda, like, working with to make that easier? Is there, like, Webpacks making that easier, Rollup or something like that?
I'm not aware of the tooling that would help bundle
Yep.
this, but it's definitely helpful to check Webpack docs. They have a section written on how module resolution is handled. And actually, there's also a bit of an article or like a small tutorial in Notes documentation about like dual publishing, which was really helpful. But there's still so many things that you just don't know,
Yeah.
because everything is in package JSON, but there's so much to discover. Like, hey,
Yeah.
this is like the special field here means something, and then the order of this field actually matters, and you just have to try and fail. And the worst thing is like there's no testing sandbox for this,
Yeah,
because you don't want to ship broken modules, so you need to kind of try to spawn it in different projects and test it yourself, and it takes a lot of time.
that's really challenging, like, as a author that, like, publishes packages like that and keeping up with the support side of it, there's so many different uses for these things. I could imagine the issues probably hit pretty heavily, like, as you release something new like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I always ask our maintainers this. It's kind of a loaded question, but if someone walked up to you today, well, let me preface it with this. There's a lot of frameworks out there that are getting picked up by like actual corporations. So like Svelte got picked up by Vercel, like those
Mhm.
sort of things. And maybe that's loose, like they picked up the maintainer of it. If someone offered you like to buy out MSW completely, would you walk away from it being open source, or is that kind of a hard line for you? Like, no, it has to stay open source.
No, I would definitely not do anything to make it closed source or not open source in any way. It's always been open source, and I really dislike this gating,
Mm,
like of publishing a limited version as open source,
yeah,
leading you to a product. I personally don't like this. I'm trying not to use tools like this unless it's absolutely necessary. I trust in open source, even if it's financially challenging to support, but I still believe that open source moves a whole industry forward, and that's why we should try to invest into open source as opposed to like cultivating more closed source tools. So no, if I get a offer like this, I would likely say no. But of course, if there is a company willing to support the project and maybe I don't know, influence the vision, maybe there's a company who wants WebSockets. Hey, let's make it happen. But it absolutely needs to stay open source, and yeah.
I love it. So what's the easiest way that people can help you financially support MSW going forward and help you be successful?
I think maybe it's a bit unorthodox, but actually the best way to support project financially is by investing your time into it. So if you become a contributor, I also view this somewhat as a financial support, because I have another person who can spend their time with me, and as a result, perhaps we spend less time together, and we move with the project faster. So that's the ideal case.
That's amazing.
And of course, if I don't know. I don't want to control or anyhow like take people how to spend their own free time. So everybody contributes to their extent of capability. And if they prefer to support project financially, there's always GitHub sponsors that we have, and there's also Open Collective. And I know there are already companies like Chromatic and GitHub that's supported the project over the years, but I wish there were more contributions, especially because I know that MSW is used in a large companies. And it'd be nice if they gave back a little, because it may be nothing for them, but it may be potentially a full-time opportunity for me. So it's a, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. Thank you for that. With that said, Appwrite's really excited to be helping sponsor you, at least for the time coming with the OSS Fund. Is there anything specific that's helping out with, adding some more time for you or servers or anything like that that you can shout out about?
For me, that's I'm first of all really thankful for this chance. It's incredible. I wish there was a more solid culture of sponsoring open source, and I think Appwrite really gives good example here, and that's awesome. And what it helps me right now is people may be aware what's happening right now in MSW is that we are working on a fetch API first changes. And this would mean that whenever you work with MSW, you're actually using the fetch API spec primitives like request and response. You basically handle requests as you would in regular code in your browser. So there's less abstractions and like a steeper learning curve or flatter learning curve. So people can jump into library and feel like they're actually learning JavaScript and not that library, which is
That's
awesome. And this is what I've been focusing on for the couple of past months. And sponsorships really help to make some of the decisions easier and maybe spend a little bit more time. And at least I know that I'm not entirely sacrificing my free time if I decide to work every weekend. And that's really helpful.
That's cool. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us for OSS Fund and joining us on this talk. Thanks again, Artem.
My pleasure.